Welcome to the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast, presented by Vox DFS Firelines. Now, here are your hosts, Justin.
Stephon Gilmore go to the Patriots. Now they let Mike Gillislee go to the Patriots. Are they now just the farm club within their own division?
Greg.
He's one of these faux leading women. It's like, that's not Angelina Jolie or Jennifer Aniston. It's some girl that I would see at the Circle K. That's kind of Alshon Jeffrey.
And Ryan.
There is absolutely no reason why O.J. Howard should be drafted before Cameron Brate.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment of the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast. It's a solo show for you tonight. I am Justin, your host. Ryan and Greg are unable to make it to today's episode with some family matters that have come up. But we're going to get into some waiver wires. We're going to cover the Monday Night Football game, some highlights from that game, which is still currently going on, score of 24-10 currently, but want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you have not already done so, we would ask that you would give us a review on iTunes. Just simply search the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast, and you can add in a review or simply leave us a comment there or something along those lines. It really helps out the show, helps boost our visibility. You can help us out. You may not be able to help the show out in any other way but this, and so we thank you for leaving that review in advance. And so we're going to get into the show. We're going to start with some news and notes, and leading into tonight's game, OBJ was activated for tonight's game and has played. He has not produced much in terms of points. I think a lot of that has to do with coming off of the ankle injury, currently with 3 catches and 26 yards. I was not expecting a lot of points from him today, but I was certainly expecting more points from the Giants offense today, as Detroit has not historically been, or has not been as of late, a dominating defense. And so we'll get more into a little best more of that information later. But we want to cover a few other pieces as well. Yesterday, Sunday, Randall Cobb had an injury. Today had an MRI for that shoulder injury and is considered day-to-day. Nothing major for that injury yet, but it was a scare as Jordy Nelson also went down early in that game and did not play the rest of the way, which led to Devontae Adams having a huge game. And so officially announced today as well that Andrew Luck is officially out again Sunday versus the Browns. I think Brissett's performance was much better than Scott Tolzien's performance, and I think they feel a little bit more comfortable with Brissett at quarterback and his ability to keep them in games and potentially win a game. Unfortunately, the Cardinals were able to pull it out in overtime against the Colts this last Sunday. John Brown with a quad injury is still expected to miss Week 3, which led to J.J. Nelson's really great performance, which I'm sure Ryan covered yesterday as well. And so a few more pieces is the Redskins coach, Jay Gruden, says that Rob Kelly and Jordan Reed are day-to-day. They say nothing major, but Jordan Reed has a tendency to be banged up and injured for extended periods of time. And that's probably the only downside to his game, is that he can't ever seem to be 100% healthy. In terms of the Redskins running back game, with Rob Kelly having some rib cartilage damage, this spells more worry, in my opinion, for the Redskins offense, because in the preseason, you saw that when the Redskins were not able to establish the run, they were not able to continue to do anything else in the passing game. And so they struggled to get the ball rolling in the running game, and because of that, I think they're struggling in the passing game outside of Chris Thompson in that huge run that he had in Sunday's game. More news on Bradford's knee injury is that it is a bone bruise. This is something to continue to monitor. Obviously, the Diggs and Thielen owners did not get the production that they did in week one, not only because Bradford was not playing, but also because they were playing a much better defense. And so another bit of injury news is that Terrence West is dealing with soft tissue injury and is listed as day-to-day. We're going to cover a little bit more about that information when we get into waiver wire ads, just to give you a little teaser there. Leading into the Falcons linebacker, I know this is a defensive injury here, but Vic Beasley is expected to miss about a month with a hamstring injury. I think this is huge for the defense of Atlanta, and I think from the running game perspective, look for a boost from the offense that plays the Atlanta Falcons going into next week. More breaking news in the ever-going saga that is Ezekiel Elliott. Judge Manzant denies the NFL's emergency motion for a stay in the Ezekiel Elliott preliminary injunction. Next stop is the Fifth Circuit Court. Well, they will begin to hear the court case. In the meantime, Ezekiel Elliott will continue to play. More than likely will play out most of the entirety of the season because of this ruling, much similar to the Tom Brady saga that was during the Deflategate issues. Texans coach Bill O'Brien is hopeful that Ryan Griffin can return this week from his concussion issue. Also, CJ Fedorowicz and his concussion issue. And so I think that if the Texans are able to get a body that is a quality starting tight end, even for the Texans, I think that will help out Deshaun Watson immensely. Bengals tight end Tyler Eifert is battling back and knee injuries, and his status for Sunday versus the Packers is uncertain. This is one of the major reasons why we told you to avoid Tyler Eifert as much as possible leading up to the draft because of his injury proneness. It was not a matter of if, but a matter of when he would get injured this year. And then moving on to some really heartbreaking news, as Panthers tight end Greg Olsen will undergo surgery on his broken foot and is expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks per the report from the Mort report. This is unfortunate because Olsen, though he's played a lot in the league and has been banged up from time to time, he hasn't really missed extended time. This does some serious damage to the Carolina Panthers offense. As you remove a very pivotal part and staple to the offense, and Cam Newton's targeting Greg Olsen. Time will tell who will really fill that vacuum. Someone has to take those targets. Time will tell who that is. I am not going to put any sort of waiver advice on the backup tight end or Devin Funchess just yet. I kind of want to see who it's going to be rather than wasting a waiver wire pick with some other options that are readily available right now. Moving on to the Patriots, the scare that was the injury to Rob Gronkowski going down with a groin injury. It's just a minor injury as it's being reported right now. There was a big scare because of Gronk's injury issues that it could have been his back. He was held out of the rest of the game against the Saints because they were ahead by so many points. I still think the Patriots, this is a continual issue to monitor, but from what this report shows, he should be free and clear to play in the next game. Another report about another injury. I know Ryan covered a lot yesterday, but it's being confirmed that Corey Coleman has a broken hand that is going to require surgery and is out indefinitely. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks with injured reserve is certainly possible. Whether or not they put him on the injury reserve that allows him to come back or not, I certainly feel like Corey Coleman is droppable at this point because this is a broken hand. Who knows how it heals coming back? Not that he won't be able to catch the ball, but I think there are other valuable players that you can have on your bench moving forward. Looking at some other options for the Browns moving forward. And then another minor injury issue is that DeMarco Murray is dealing with a tight hamstring that he experienced during the second half of the Titans' Week 2 win over the Jaguars. This is kind of telling because Henry was a monster in the relief effort, and I think you'll begin to see a little bit more of a shared workload as they want to try and keep DeMarco Murray as healthy as possible. It's been a matter of time on this one, on whether or not and when Henry will take over as the lead back here. He's an absolute monster, a 6'4", 240 kind of guy with blazing speed and really torched a quality defense in the Jaguars this last week. But this is also something to monitor. If you were a DeMarco Murray owner, I hope you were smart enough to handcuff him with Henry. Henry is or was at least still widely available in leagues. He's not available in any league I'm in. I'm a heavy owner of Henry this year because, once again, it's just a matter of time before Father Time catches up with DeMarco Murray. And so with those being the major points of information so far, we'll keep in touch and keep up to date on how the Monday Night Football game is going. Currently, a score of 24-10 with about 4:30 left in the game. No one is really jumping off the page in terms of fantasy production unless you are a tight end in this game with Eric Ebron, 5 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown. And Evan Ingram with 4 catches, 49 yards and a touchdown. So very, very similar outcomes so far from the tight end perspective. But what we'll do now is get into some fantasy waiver wire pickups. Today's waiver wire or the Week 3 waiver wire pickups are brought to you by PlayDraft. Here's how it works. There's no management. Just set it up and forget it. Once you're done drafting, that's it. No trades, no waiver wire. Draft even takes care of last-minute injuries for you. Drafts start every couple of minutes, so you can join one now. For limited time only, all new players get free entry into real money draft when you make your first deposit. But if you have to use, but you have to use the promo code KSR. That's right. Play a real money game just for free just by using the promo code SKF Football. That's SKF Football, and you can get free entry into some money drafts with your first deposit. And so getting into the waiver wire pickups for this week, we're going to start with the quarterback position and then move through all the way to the tight end position. And so these are in no particular order, but these are guys that I'm looking to grab in the waivers this week. Number one that we'll start off with, once again, not in numerical order, is Trevor Siemian, currently owned in only 12% of leagues. Trevor Siemian has put up good numbers for the first 2 games on the Cowboys and the Rams. He won't really put a ton of yards on you, But with the Denver defense creating short fields and quality receivers in Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, he will continue to produce starting numbers in the high quarterback 2 to low quarterback 1 range. Like I said, owned in only 88% of leagues, viable target for you to grab if you were the unfortunate owner of an Andy Dalton and are looking to drop him as quickly as possible. Another one we highlighted last week as well, Alex Smith, currently owned in only 43% of leagues. He got a huge uptick from last week because of his monstrous game against the Patriots. But he came back down to earth from that career performance against the Patriots. He played a very tough Eagles defense that kept the Redskins at bay in week 1. With the home run hitters at each of the offensive positions in Tyreek at wide receiver, and Kareem Hunt at running back, and Travis Kelce at tight end, Alex Smith should continue to help his team out and continue to produce fantasy quarterback level 1 numbers, and should continue to do so throughout the year with those offensive weapons. Moving on to the running back position, we're going with guys that are currently owned in very few leagues. I'm going to start with Alvin Kamara, who's currently only owned in 14% of leagues. The fact that he's still available in 86% of leagues, according to ESPN, is a tragedy. If you've watched the Saints games at all, through the first 2 games, you know that Kamara has been the number 2 in targets on the team the first 2 weeks, with 6 targets in week 1, 7 targets in week 2. They are working him into the game regardless of how you feel about Peterson or Ingram. It's clear that Sean Payton is going to find ways to get this young talent the ball. They found very, very creative ways to do it in week 1, and he out-touched both Ingram and Peterson in week 1. He did not get very many rushes. He only got, I believe, 1 carry this week from the rushing perspective, but has still continued to be the passing aspect and the passing down player above Ingram currently for this New Orleans offense. And so as the season continues and as his chemistry continues with Breeze, his numbers will continue to grow, and you'll see more and more catches from him as the weeks progress, with a shot to replace Ingram outright as the running back in PPR leagues. I think Peterson can still stay viable in terms of being the lead in terms of running back. I don't like Peterson at all in standard leagues. He's just not going to get the volume or the touches that are required for him to be fantasy relevant in standard leagues. There's too many bodies. But in PPR, where receptions are so valuable, Alvin Kamara is a great fantasy addition. I'm looking to add Kamara in my leagues because of waiver wires, because I don't think this next guy will be available because of my success in the first 2 weeks, not being able to grab him. Next is Chris Carson, running back of the Seahawks, who's currently owned in only 8% of leagues. This is really my number 1 grab of the week because you're not going to get a number 1 running back this late, or I should say you're not going to find a number 1 running back on the week 3 waiver wires that's going to start and be the starter for the rest of the season without some sort of injury or major issue. Going into the season this year, you know that Seattle had a number of different options. Thomas Rawls, Eddie Lacy, Chris Carson showed up very, very well in preseason, but was far down the depth chart. Well, now, from early on in the second quarter, Thomas Rawls never touched the ball again in the game, and Chris Carson was the running back from quarter 2 through the end of the game. The dust has really settled here, and Carson is without question the starter and the lead back for Seattle, who will continue to run the ball throughout the season. It's something that opens up their passing game. Russell Wilson will continue to use kind of that read option from time to time. But considering that Seattle, once again, will continue to rush the ball throughout the season. This is a starting running back that you can get on week 3 on the waiver wire and is currently my number 1 target. Moving on, Voorhis Allen, or Buck Allen, is currently owned in 8% of leagues. He is my other heavy target this week because of how valuable running backs can be in PPR. Not as valuable as in standard, but pass-catching backs in PPR are absolutely valuable. And Allen has taken over the Woodhead role in that Ravens offense, with Woodhead taking a backseat because of the injuries. And with Terrence West now dealing with a soft tissue injury, Allen will not only see an uptick in opportunities, but if West gets any worse, Allen will be the feature back in town. And Allen ran for 66 yards on 14 carries, 5 catches, 35 yards, and a TD against a Cleveland defense that held Le'Veon Bell to only 32 yards rushing. So Allen has kind of revitalized himself from the previous year where he was kind of passed over. And I really like Allen moving forward on a team that will continue to dump the ball off to the running back position and has had a little bit of struggle in throwing the ball deep so far this season. Moving on to the wide receiver position in fantasy football, we're going with a couple more guys that are owned in very few leagues. Kind of my number 1 guy this week is Jermaine Kearse, who's currently only owned in 6% of leagues. Jermaine Kearse came into town, into the New York Jets locker room, and immediately became the number 1 receiver. But considering the roster that the Jets have constructed for this season and the loss at the wide receiver position, that wasn't really saying much 2 weeks ago. But with the chemistry developed with McCown and not much else on the offense, Kearse has really flourished with 11 catches, 123 yards, and 2 TDs through the first 2 weeks, outscoring many first-round drafted receivers in fantasy football. I continue to see Jermaine Kearse being fantasy relevant, kind of in the high wide receiver 2 range, because he's really the only wide receiver target. Now, if you've been listening for a while, we've talked about Austin Seferian-Jenkins coming in and establishing himself as a wide receiver option when he got done serving his 2-week suspension. I'm going to wait a week on Jenkins before moving on him, because now with Kearse being a number 1 option ahead of Robbie Anderson, I think that eats a little bit into the opportunity that ASJ would have had upon his return from his suspension, with the great production that he had in preseason and the great change that he has made in his own life personally. But really, I believe Kearse, we've talked about bad rosters still going out and grabbing that number 1 receiver as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2 option because of volume and their ability to be the number 1 option on their team. Another wide receiver waiver wire pickup is Cooper Kupp, who's currently owned in 33% of leagues. Look, the Rams' offense is better, and so far I have been wrong on Gurley. I think they have done a very good job of implementing him more in the pass game, and that's where you see Gurley's value. Still struggling to run the ball consistently on the ground. But getting back to Kupp and Gurley are really leading the team in production for the first 2 weeks. Goff will continue to use the short passing game and to move the ball horizontally rather than vertically in order to move the ball down the field. They'll stretch you horizontally and using Kupp on short slant routes and short routes underneath, dump offs to Todd Gurley to really stretch the field, and then throw some of those deep balls to maybe a Sammy Watkins. But really the offense is going to be running through Kupp and Goff. Kupp has been the number 1 targeted receiver in that offense for 2 consecutive weeks, and also leading in the production of yards and touchdowns. And so I really believe in Cooper Kupp because of what he brings to the table in the short passing game, and that looks to be the way that the Rams are going this year for their offense. Moving on to the tight end position, I'm going with Eric Ebron. Now, he had a great first half in the Monday Night Football game tonight. Did not do too much in the second half. Eric Ebron got 5 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown in terms of his production, and I believe he is a great target to grab, currently owned in 29% of leagues. He was, at the time of the start of this episode, he was currently the number 1 target for Stafford tonight against the Giants. I wasn't really on the Ebron train at the beginning of the season, but I also wasn't on the you got to drop Ebron as fast as possible train either. I think you really needed to see it from Ebron before starting him, and I think tonight was enough to show you that he can produce for fantasy. Excuse me there. Pardon my throat there. The other tight end option is currently owned in 0.5% of leagues, according to ESPN. Now, I know what you're going to say. Ben Watson wasn't picked up. No one owns him. No one drafts him for a reason. Everyone wanted to see what he could do after his injury before moving forward. But I think this week showed you what he could do in terms of production for the Ravens offense. I think he is helped out by the fact that Danny Woodhead is not available and the fact that Flacco loves his tight ends anyway. Watson proved to be valuable for Breeze when he played for the Saints before coming to the Ravens. And we all know how much Flacco loves his tight ends. Pitta was very valuable in fantasy last year, and I expect Watson to return similar value, if not more, from the tight end position, which puts you at a low tight end 1, high tight end 2 range. I think Watson, with the other options that are available and Flacco's inconsistency in throwing the ball deep, I think Watson's a great choice to pick up for the long term. I would give him the edge over Eric Ebron, even though Ebron is in an offense that wants to pass the ball more. I think Ebron has to deal with other issues. In that there's more targets on his offense in a Golden Tate, a Kenny Golladay, and a Marvin Jones competing for production. And so that kind of wraps up our show. I know it was a little bit of a short episode tonight with only one, but wanted to focus and stay to the point for tonight's episode. Tomorrow we will be getting into some keep, trade, cut, some buy and sell, and starting to review some of the games for next week. Hopefully you guys had a great week and were able to pick up the points or extend your lead in tonight's Monday Night Football game and the production that was brought here. Thank you for listening. Check out the PlayDraft app. Use the Skull King promo code to help out the show. Remember to send in those reviews as well to help out the show. Thank you for joining and listening to today's show, brought to you by our main sponsor, Vox DFS Firelines, who provide daily fantasy lines for you. Wanted to make sure that I mentioned them just before signing off. But once again, thank you for stopping by the Skull King Fantasy Football Podcast, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Hey, Skull King Nation. Thank you for listening to the Skull King Football Podcast. Did you like this episode? If so, be sure to go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube to subscribe. Also, please leave us a rating and reviews to let us know how we can better help you rule your leagues.